Welcome back to ProtoMet Reviews, where today we're continuing our ongoing series and reviewing Star Wars: The Empire Strikes Back. Now, bit of backstory for this one, because these are Star Wars movies. They have backstory. Anyway, after the destruction of the Death Star at the end of A New Hope, the Rebels have not actually had a very good time, as the Empire has come down on them hard. The Rebels have been forced from their hidden base on Yavin 4 and have now found themselves hiding out on the ice planet of Hoth. Meanwhile, the Empire is amassing its forces to search out and destroy the Rebels. And they're sending out probes to various planets to find them. And the film opens with one such probe landing on Hoth and beginning its search. Meanwhile, Luke, the hero from the previous film, is off on his horned kangaroo ride called a Tauntaun when he spots a meteor crash. He reports in to his buddy Han Solo, telling him, it's like, hey, I spotted this thing, I'm going to go investigate, and then I'm going to come back to base. And so Han's like, okay, I'm going to head back to base. So Luke goes off to investigate the meteor, but before he can do anything, him and his Tauntaun are attacked by a Yeti-like creature called a Wampa, which knocks Luke out cold. Back at the Rebel base on Hoth, Han checks in and is like, hey, this is what's going on. Luke is going to investigate this thing and he'll come back. There's some tension between Han and Princess Leia Organa, because Han is convinced that she's into him, and she is basically saying, no, I'm not. It's pretty good ongoing plot throughout this film, which I'll bring up a bit more later. But Han himself is worried, and he and Chewie are working to fix the Millennium Falcon because of a encounter with a bounty hunter between the previous film and this film that has kind of got Han spooked, because clearly Jabba wants his money, and since Han has not gotten back to him with that money, he sent out this bounty hunter to go catch him. So Han kind of just wants to leave as soon as possible. But then he learns that Luke has not come back from his patrol and gets worried for him, and then goes out in his own Tauntaun to go find him. Meanwhile, back with Luke manages to free himself from hanging upside down in an ice cave, and manages to disarm, literally, the Wampa that has eaten his Tauntaun, and Luke manages to escape. But it's getting towards night and getting really, really cold out. And so while he's traversing the snowy wastes, he collapses and begins having a vision of Obi-Wan telling him to go find this Jedi Master named Yoda in the Dagobah system. This is when Han shows up and finds Luke, who is on the cusp of consciousness. As fate would have it, Han's own Tauntaun collapses from the cold, and Han is forced to cut it open and shove Luke inside to keep Luke alive while he builds a shelter. The next morning, a patrol goes out, and they manage to find Han and Luke and bring him back to base to recover. And Luke really needs it because, he almost died of the cold. But anyway, back at the Rebel base, a signal is picked up, and and they're not familiar with it. And C-3PO is like, well, maybe it's an Imperial signal. And this concerns the Rebels because they don't want to be found out. So they decide, okay, we got to evacuate the planet. So they scramble to get everything ready to evacuate when the Empire brings in a bunch of Star Destroyers around Hoth. So the Rebels have to step up their evacuation plans, and one of their evacuation transport ships does manage to get away with the help of the Rebels on planet, while the second ship is getting ready. So there's a big battle on Hoth where the Rebels are fighting against these large quadrupedal mechs called AT-ATs, I think, which kind of look like elephants without the trunk or the ears. Or I guess camels if you're JonTron. Watch that episode, it's pretty funny. But anyway, Luke and his squadron managed to take down a couple. One by tying a tow cable around the thing's legs, and another by Luke using a grappling hook, going up, cutting a hole in the thing's underside with his lightsaber and tossing a grenade, and then detaching from the thing. And honestly, the entire sequence is pretty good. But during all this, Leia gets separated from the transport ship that she's supposed to be going with, and Han takes her with him, Chewie, and C-3PO aboard the Millennium Falcon, and they get off planet, and so the rebels managed to successfully evacuate, though at high cost. Meanwhile, the Empire is doggedly pursuing the Millennium Falcon, while Luke Skywalker in his X-Wing, along with the droid R2-D2, take off and head for the Dagobah system, because Luke is convinced that he has to go there and meet this Yoda guy. So Luke manages to arrive on Dagobah, but kind of crashes into the swamp there, and R2 falls into the swamp and is working to make his way to the shore when he gets attacked by a swamp creature. We don't really see what it is, but it's larger than R2 is. Fortunately, the creature finds R2 inedible and spits him back out of the water. It's kind of a funny scene. Anyway, back with the Falcon, they're trying to evade the Empire when Han realizes our hyperdrive isn't working. Chewie, C-3PO, you guys go back there and try and fix that. Well, he does his best to avoid getting attacked by the Empire. And in order to avoid being caught, he decides, okay, I'm going to steer myself into this asteroid field. So he does. So they're in the asteroid field. Back with the Empire, they're like, okay, they're going to an asteroid field. That's not good for us. But Darth Vader's like, no, you keep pursuing them. Use every ship available. Which is not a very good idea, but who's going to argue with a guy who can choke you without even just... Who's going to argue with a guy who can choke you just by looking at you? Certainly not that former Admiral guy who's now dead and replaced by another Admiral. Because he's dead. Anyway, back on Dagobah, Luke and R2 encounter this mischievous imp creature who mentions, hey, I know this Yoda guy you're looking for. I'll go take you to see him. Luke's like, well, okay. The imp guy's like, we'll just swing by my place, pick up a bite to eat, and then we'll go find him. Luke's like, oh, okay. And so it goes back to this imp guy's place, and he's like, they have a meal, but Luke is clearly growing more and more impatient and just wants to find this Yoda guy. And then he begins hearing the voice of Obi-Wan talking to the imp, talking to the imp, and Luke gradually realizes this imp is Yoda. And Yoda clearly does not want to train Luke, feeling that he's not in a position to be trained. He's too impatient, too old. Yoda really tries to find any excuse to not train this kid. Luke and Obi-Wan are like, come on, train him. You can do it. Go ahead, train him. So Yoda begrudgingly agrees to train Luke. Back with the Millennium Falcon, they manage to avoid detection by hiding inside one of the asteroids and work on and powering down the ship enough so that they can keep working on the ship to try and fix the hyperdrive while not alerting the Empire to their presence. So they're fixing up the ship, and then it starts to get attacked by these strange winged creatures. And so Han, Leia, and Chewie go out and try and get these things off the ship, when one of Chewie's stray shots ends up causing a tremor inside the cavern they're in, Han realizes, that's not good. Everybody back in the ship. We gotta leave. Because as it turns out, they are inside a living creature. Oh boy. Wow. But they managed to escape just in the nick of time, but still have the Empire on their tails. Meanwhile, back on Dagobah, Luke is being trained by Yoda, and the first part of his training is to go into this cave to engage in a test. Luke goes in, but Yoda tells him, don't bring your weapons. Luke goes in with weapons, and there he encounters Darth Vader. And the two fight with lightsabers, and Luke manages to decapitate Darth Vader, seemingly winning. And then Darth Vader's mask blows off and reveals that the face underneath is Luke's. What? So, yeah, Luke has failed his first test as a Jedi. Or Jedi in training, really. Back with the Empire, Darth Vader is none too pleased that he doesn't have the Millennium Falcon in his grasp, and so he decides to hire a bunch of bounty hunters to go after the Millennium Falcon. Now, during all this, the Millennium Falcon has a run-in with a Star Destroyer, and manages to avoid being shot down, and then just drops off the ship's radar. It's like, where'd the Millennium Falcon go? As it turns out, it's powered down and kind of attached itself to the back of one of the Star Destroyers. And they wait patiently for the Star Destroyer to release its garbage load, and then just kind of detach from the ship and float off with the garbage. And the plan works for the most part, except that one of the bounty hunters, Boba Fett, has spotted him in his ship and goes off in pursuit. Now, back on Dagobah, Luke is being trained by Yoda to lift rocks, and this is going okay until R2 kind of makes a commotion because the X-Wing is sinking deeper into the swamp. And Luke is like, oh no, at this point we probably can't get it out. And then Yoda's like, no, you can do it. Go ahead and try. Go ahead and get it out. And Luke is like, well, I'll try. And then Yoda's like, no. Do not, there is no try. You either do or you don't. Okay? There's no try. So Luke is like, okay. So he uses his force powers in an attempt to get the X-Wing out, and it doesn't work. And Luke is like, no, it's too heavy, I can't do it. And then Yoda's like, here, let me. And then he uses his force powers, and he does lift the X-Wing out of the swamp. And Luke's like, I don't believe it. And Yoda's like, and that's why you fail. Now, at this point, Luke has a vision of Han and Leia in pain, and he's like, gets really worried. But Yoda's like, no, you stay here and train. If you care about your friends and what they're fighting for, you will stay here and train. And even Obi-Wan's like, no, Luke, stay here, finish your training. But Luke was like, no, I gotta go help them. I gotta go help them. They're in trouble. I gotta go help them. Not good for what's going on. Anyway, back with the Millennium Falcon, Han is like, okay, we've managed to get away from the Empire. I know a place where we can regroup. We'll go to this gas planet called Bespin. I know a guy there who runs a cloud city there. A guy named Lando Calrissian. So they go to Bespin, and after a bit of hesitance, they do manage to get clearance to land in the city. And there, Han and Lando are reunited. It's like, oh, good friends meeting up with each other. And Lando is just leading everybody through the place and is like, okay, and talking about how his city has managed to avoid being detected by the Empire by not really trying to arouse too much attention. And at one point, C-3PO kind of wanders off into this side corridor and gets shot to pieces. Not good. Well, anyway, Chewbacca at one point has to go off in search of C-3PO because he's been missing for a while and finds him in pieces and about to be melted down for parts and stuff. But he manages to save C-3PO's body and takes it with him back to their room to work on fixing him. Lando comes in and is like, "Hey, come on, we'll get a bite to eat. Probably hungry." So they take him into this. So he leads them into this room, into this dining room where Darth Vader is waiting, and Lando kind of reluctantly admits that they got here first and they've been looking for you. So now Leia, Han, and Chewbacca are in the Empire's custody, and Luke is on his way to the Cloud City to help them. And Darth Vader is aware of this fact and decides, okay, we're going to test this carbon freezing machine that you have here, Lando, and we're gonna freeze Han Solo in carbonite as a test because Darth Vader plans on trapping Luke Skywalker in this same machine. Boba Fett, who was instrumental in actually finding where the Millennium Falcon is going, is like, don't kill him. He has a lot of value to me alive. I need him alive or I can't collect. And Darth Vader is like, don't worry. If he dies, you will be recompensated. And so they freeze Han in carbonite, but before he does, Leia admits that she loves him, and Han's like, I know. And so, yeah. Anyway, Han is frozen in carbonite, but he is still alive, just in hibernation or whatever. So Boba Fett's like, okay, gonna take this. And Lando has been told that now that Han is frozen, Lando believes that with Han frozen, he'll have Leia and Chewbacca under his watch and guard. But Darth Vader is like, nope, I'm taking them with him. And then Lando's like, that was not part of the deal. And then Darth Vader is like, I'm changing the deal. Pray I don't change it further. And so Chewie and Leia are being led away. And Luke has arrived by this point, and Leia manages to tell Luke that there's a trap, don't follow. Luke follows anyway, and has a run-in with Darth Vader in the carbon freezing chamber. And a fight ensues. Luke gets knocked into the carbon freezing device, and Darth Vader activates it. But Luke manages to jump out at the right time, just in time, and avoids being frozen, and thus continuing the fight between him and Darth Vader. Now Lando secretly activates a protocol that winds up with a group of stormtroopers and Empire staff that are escorting Chewie and Leia to Darth Vader's ship to basically be held at gunpoint to let the two go. Now, by this point, Chewbacca, using his mechanical skills, has managed to fix up C-3PO a bit, who is just kind of a condescending asshole at this point in the film. It's kind of funny. It's kind of yeah. But anyway, so yeah. So anyway, Lando frees Chewie and Leia. Chewie begins strangling the guy, but he's like, "No, stop that! We can save Han. Just let me go." So Chewie reluctantly lets him go, and they go off to go save Han. Except that they're too late, and Boba Fett's ship takes off with Han. Not good. So Lando is forced to call for an evacuation of Cloud City so that everybody can get off planet before the Empire can arrive and bring the hammer down on them. And so Lando, Chewie, and Leia, as well as C-3PO and R2, have to get back to the Millennium Falcon and take off. Now, during all this, Luke is still fighting with Darth Vader, and this is not going very well for Luke, especially when his hand gets cut off. Ouch. And Vader has, by this point, begun working to convince Luke to come over to the dark side of the Force and work for the Empire. But Luke will not have it. And then Darth Vader's like, Obi-Wan never told you what happened to your father, did he? And Luke's like, he told me you killed him. And then Darth Vader drops a bomb. No, I am your father. I mean, granted, if you've been paying attention to the prequel trilogy, you probably figured this out already. But for audiences for watching this back in the day, this was a mind blow. But rather than turn to the dark side, rather than join his father and turn to the dark side, Luke instead decides to drop himself into a deep chasm and winds up inside this pipe working on the underside of the city. And then he gets dropped down to just below the city. Leia tells Lando to go back, and they find Luke and manage to catch him, and they take off again. Luke ends up getting a new mechanical hand. The Millennium Falcon regroups with the rebels. Lando and Chewie go off in search of Han because Lando is feeling pretty bad about having betrayed his friend. Though he did it to save the people of Bespin, but now that that's not really an issue. In fact, the people of Bespin are probably in more danger now because of the Empire's misdevious ways. So, yeah. Lando and Chewie are going off to find Han. They say, once we find him, we're gonna contact you and you can come help get him, save him. And that's really where the film comes to its end. Honestly, this film is very well done, and while I will admit I wasn't nearly as excited as I was during the previous film, I was enthralled in the plot. It is very well written, very well acted, the special effects are really good. I strongly recommend checking it out. There's a reason why people consider it to be the best in the franchise, or at least a really good entry. So, yeah. Check it out. This has been me, ProtoMet. See ya.